Okay, Mark, why don't I start? We have a ritual here, which basically whenever we have a guest, we ask one of those existentialist questions. So the first existentialist question is Marc Paul, who are you?
So that's a good question. Thanks for having me, first of all. I would say tech enthusiast. So I'm born young in the world of technology, having taken apart my toys and like just to find out what's happening in there and how to make it work differently. And I think that's somehow been pulled like a red thread through my life. I love to take things apart, build them then together differently. And that's brought me to game development, brought me over to VR, AR, a little bit dabbling with blockchain, and now into the AI space. And it's been a fun journey.
Okay, so you're trying to unpack, okay? So unpacking this is going to take a while, okay? So you make things?
Yeah, like I think it comes from many different paths. Like I started out with hardware, to be fairly honest, when I was really young, taking apart like my old electronic toys and building together to something different. But then I got more into the software side, in like basically studying actually game development, learning how to code. From there on out, the VR string came up back 2016 or something. Like VR started picking off, and I got the opportunity to the university working with hardware again and like working on VR. Got some internships in AR actually, working with the HoloLens afterwards. And coming out of that, working with a lot of research stuff, I was like, that's my field to go. I'd love to go more in research and look at different things and find out more. And that's driven me since.
It's not enough to have people who make things, code, and then want to do research at the same time, right? So that's a bit unusual, I think. I don't know whether we, let me just do the education bit, Jacques, and then you dive in too, because inevitably the big elephant in the room at the moment is AI. So inevitably we'll talk about AI, okay? But I think in terms of the work you do right now, the fact that I bumped into you at a time when there was some national skills conference and you were talking about games, digital games, pedagogy of games. It's something which I think we'd like to know more about, and specifically because we have different generations. Okay, so you got the Gen Z, baby boomer. I don't know where you are. I mean,
right in between the millennial and Gen Z. I'm like 1996, so it's just on the corner.
So you're just on the wrong side of the Gen Z side. Yeah. So I think it's more a case of the kind of work that you do right now with a company, and you can talk about the company where you're at, and we're in Malta at the moment, so it's fine to talk about how you came here and why you're here and what your company does and what your company does within the sphere of education. I think that's of interest to us.
I think there's multiple questions to unpack there. I think like the starting point of why I came here was more opportunities and getting started with something. I came here and it was a very open culture in general in Malta that got me, especially in the startup scene, where I got to meet people quickly, got handed over quickly to other people, got to know other people more. And that's been going on since. And I really appreciate that about Malta. How I got into education, though, was just coincidence through that. So I moved here with a different job, working in blockchain, basically, and got a chance over here to actually work in education with an American company that has a base in Malta. And that's basically Axon Park that I'm currently working at now as a lead producer. And I think the whole who I am, and it all accumulates with AI to like one big thing together. I've used AI so much in the recent years and in learning and educating myself and doing stuff with it to get better at the things I love to do, which are oddly specific and very random. And that has been helping me in educating myself in spaces that aren't very, there isn't that much education out there for some of the things, like especially the VR space when I started out was very, very getting started at that point. There wasn't that much research to it. Same with AI happening now a little bit. How to use it actually is getting found out now. And AI makes that so much easier to do for yourself, which brought me into the space where Taylor, my CEO, came to me and like told me about their project. And I saw the possibility of actually using AI as a means to get that personalized interest for everyone kind of available. Like everyone can now learn something at home that they have dreamed of many years before, or at least get started on it.
I'm interested in what was your view of education when you were younger? Because you seem like someone who's very passionate about continuous learning. You also mentioned research as being something you're passionate about. And then you also said, obviously, that you stumbled into education. But when you were growing up or in university, what was your perspective of university and its utility, or school more broadly?
Being fairly honest, I always hated school. And university, the same thing for me, repeated in a different pattern. And there was parts in my university where I was really lucky that I was in a very application-based university. So we did a lot of project work, which was, I think, the biggest thing that I took out of it. And I was always saying that school is not really representative of what's actually happening in the world. And I think that's a lot of kids see that even while they are in school, that it doesn't really help. And it's not really a representation of what will come towards them. And coming into university, I did, for example, mathematics as one of my main things in high school. We redid the whole mathematics that I did basically again in university because everyone needed to be brought to the same state again. So it's a lot of repetition. It's a lot about same things, and it's not really applicable for every individual, but more for general masses. And I think that's the big problem that always got me, where I think now we finally got the chance to go away from mass production education towards personal education.
Let me ask you a question about this, because clearly this is kind of close to my heart. I'm a professor at university, and it just happens that at the moment I'm together with some colleagues. I'm working on a chapter on a book which is looking at the impact of AI on this thing called education. And it seems to me that there is chaos all over the place. Ironically, one of the exceptions is the University of Malta. The University of Malta was very clear about this, and I think it's something that I'm very happy about. The University of Malta decided that AI is another tool. And the same way that we had a crisis when calculators were first introduced, we had to treat AI in the same way. So at the same time, I'm very much interested in personal learning pathways, which is what you were suggesting that we should be looking at. And I would love to have AI help me whenever I'm in front of, let's say, I don't know, next February, 100 odd people. Yeah. And see how AI can help me going from a one-size-fits-all education system to a personalized. Can you immediately, think of a solution for me as to what can I do short of getting, I don't know, people's profiles, upload them on Claude or ChatGPT or on Notebook LM and say, what should I do? Is there any other, how would you go about this? And I'm putting you on the hot seat as somebody who said you didn't like formal university education.
I mean, that goes pretty much, and that's, since I work in the field, I of course advertise kind of our own system that we're building out. Because I think the big problem right now is in AI that it's very splintered, and it creates a lot of chaos right now, because what a person who knows how to use it can do with it is vastly different than a person who just uses it once can do with it. And that's something that, for example, we at Axon Park try to eliminate now. We're trying to make it for teachers equally easy to create a gaming experience based on the data they already have. So you ingest your papers, your PDFs that you already have, and basically it distills it down to the information that is content in that papers and creates lessons based on that. Those lesson generations can either be done based on the information that you put in. So you would like to have a lesson about a specific part, or what we're kind of working towards is having basically, you just say these things need to be learned, and the students have certain things that they like to do better. For example, some like quiz format more, some like to listen to stuff, some like to actually see pictures with it. And instead of defining how the information is transferred and how they are actually perceiving it and how they're repeating it, rather you're just giving them a subset of information and they're taking it and putting it in however that fits for them. As long as the result in the end, and that's kind of the thing that we need to rethink, is how do you judge if someone is actually good at something? Because, I mean, application-based things is probably the best thing to actually judge if someone can do a certain task with the knowledge they have. Because multiple choice quizzes only go so far, which are especially like apparent in America, I think is a bit.
And you talk about young children, I guess, yeah. I
mean, young children. I think it also goes further. I think that I noticed that there's a vast difference between the things that got tested in our university as hardcore tests and what the people were actually able to do in group-based work, what they were able to contribute, which might have been much more specific, much more untangible, and not asked for in a literal multiple choice quiz or even in a free answer quiz, semantic quiz. But the work that you're able to do in the actual work you're doing in the future is so much different from what the theoretical learning actually, just the questionality thing gives you.
Are we still stuck in the garbage in, garbage out situation though, aren't we? Because I mean, you're still relying on data, which is coming in.
But I think that's a general thing that we have in our society. As education is standing today, I'd say it has the same problems of garbage in, garbage out. And that's, I think, the biggest question mark there, because AI is highlighting a lot of these things because it brings it to the top very fast. But also all things that I think we've been talking about for years, and you probably have more experience with that there has been like need for education change for quite some time. There has been a need for more people in education who are educating, and it's been always just getting less people who are able to educate. And I think we've always been trying to treat some kind of, in Germany, we had like G8 was the name. We reduced the school year by 1 and increased the hours the students had in the 11th, 10th and 12th classes, basically, which got removed afterwards again because it wasn't fitted. But we are trying to treat the symptoms inside schools the way they are instead of looking at the bigger picture of
what are schools for. But it still doesn't solve my problem as to what do I do, as I'm stuck in this world of looking at screens, which is normally what I have, right? People facing me. They may not even want to be there. And I'm trying to think of how can you make 2 hours of our time valuable to both of us? And that's what I'm trying to get to the root bottom at the moment. The only thing I could come up with, and I tried this probably unsuccessfully, but last October, was to have a survey. And I just came up with a survey as this. I just zeroed in on 21st century skills. Okay. So, how good are you on, creative thinking, communications, some digital literacies, ICT literacies, and saw what came back. And I'm still not sure that the AI is helping me. I think as an educator, it's helping me more in terms of, it's almost like having a research assistant on speed in my case. Okay. So it's helping me do things quicker, faster. What we haven't touched on is games though. And I go back to that because I'm totally game illiterate. Okay. My generation missed out on the opportunity of becoming games because simply, I saw my first computer when I was 23. Okay. So you guys were born with it. So I before we go into that, I mean, the idea of games and games for learning, is that something which is like the norm in Germany or the norm in the US? And I know that we were in Sweden, in October, and we went to one of these games. So tell me how you see games helping education, helping people do things better than the traditional education system.
Yeah, I think it's been a few years now that I think in Germany, for example, there's something called serious games, which basically goes in the direction of education games. I think it's been a topic since education and like gaming in general has gotten a little bit less of the stigma. Like I grew up in my age, I was still a nerd. I still played games and I was one of the few people in my classroom who played games. But I was also there for the time when it started changing, where people started being more appreciative of games, and then especially the whole esports scene started coming, and that's I think where a lot of the more set people started picking off. Okay, games actually have more value than just gaming. I'd say the amount of serious games that came throughout the past years are all trying to go in the right direction, and I think there is already some good implementation of it. I don't have anything personally where I say like, hey, this was a game that actually helped me educate, but I still remember the few games that I had as a kid which were educational in a sense, which In Germany, there's this book called Was ist was? It's like what is what. I think it also exists elsewhere. And you have I had a game that was just a point and click adventure, and you had to learn about the underwater world. And those little things, I appreciate them much different than I did actual the paper that I get in school. And I think that's a big difference that games can do for us in a world where education has a big stigma. It's not fun. It's not a cool thing. It's always a means to an end. You have to learn to get somewhere.
The credential. You have to get the credential. And once you get the credential, then you move on.
My experience with university has been that this is more so the case, or is becoming more so the case, that people see university as directly, or schooling is directly something that they are there to get something out of, that you're going to get the skill that's going to make you this job, that's going to get you this money. And I feel that in lectures and even with colleagues, when lecturers are unable to sort of prove this sort of continuum, people seem to lose interest. Do you think that games run this risk that maybe people will be more interested but less bothered? Which is something you've seen so far. Even these smart games you're describing, they started to come around when we were in school, and they were back then, whilst they beat writing stuff on pen and paper, I think they were not necessarily game changing.
I think that's the big question. Is that little bit of more interest game changing enough to get people to have an interest in learning again? I think that we're trying, and that's a little bit of a hard thing. We can't reset education as it is. So we have to find steps to get there slowly. And I think having an interest in integral, self-driven interest into something, and finding it out for yourself is something that already helps getting people into the mindset of learning. So I always compare it with getting to understand the 190 Pokemons and all their different attacks. It's like learning vocabulary in a whole different language, but people do it freely in their own time, and they go not only in there, but beyond that. And I think that's something that you can trigger or wake up for a person. I think there's a lot of rocket scientists on the world. A lot of kids start out wanting to be rocket scientists. The way there is hard, but because we made it very dry. If you teach a kid how to build a rocket in their garden, a lot of them will do that stuff for that. And then going the next step, buying yourself a DIY rocket kit and understanding that and getting every bigger. There's a lot of people who do it at home, but it's not the same as education. And then there again comes the credential thing in where we're talking about.
I think it's the last bastion of education institutions' power is the credential.
Yeah.
We're about to start working on a project on micro credentials, as it happens. So little bits and pieces of credential that you can then stack up. Yeah. You have 5 of these, and it's almost as good as me having gone to university, for instance. Okay. The trouble is that we focus too much on education and never focus on learning. And learning is something which should be very personal. It should be, and again, people like me are obsessed with lifelong learning because I put it down to life. If you're not interested in learning, why stay alive anymore? That's the way I see it now. It doesn't mean that what you learn is necessarily useful or even whatever. But if you don't want to learn anything, if you don't want to wake up in the morning and learn something, what's the use? But it's a model which is very divorced from the education institutions that we have, which are called, higher education institutions or TVET organizations or universities, which don't now have the rubber stamp of accreditation. In other words, you don't have the piece of paper. Now you have the piece of paper. And then it goes back to what Jack is saying. Now I can get more money. But it's a very utilitarian way of looking at these things. Now, you'll find that most people who are in the business of education don't think that's what's happening. I assume very naively that people who I'm facing, the 120 of them, are not necessarily just sitting there because they want to get their credential, or not even sitting there, but even turning up. In fact, basically saying, just give me the credential, I've paid for it. And that's, for me, is a very sad state of affairs. So then you go back to either saying, blow up the whole model. It doesn't work anymore. And yet you will find that even in places like Africa, most people still want to go to university. even if you tell them that, here's a job, you can become, can spray cars. There's a lot of money in spraying cars. Or here you can go to college and learn how to plaster something. So I don't know how we're going to fix this. And I want to take this back to AI, because, can AI help people plaster a wall better, maybe, or find the right ingredients in the same way you can find ingredients to make a bomb, for I know. And we haven't turned it into VR yet, and I want to focus on VR too.
Yeah, I mean and that's I think where AI can come in, and as you said, it's a superpowered assistant, and that's I think what the main part behind of this. It won't change and exchange the exchange between two people, but it supports that, and it can get you going and can get you conversation starters. So if, for example, like you said, the guy who plasters his walls might not find necessarily anything new on ChatGPT, but he might find some new ideas over it and can discuss them with an actual person who also plasters, and like they try something together. And that's, I think, where a lot of the ideation comes from. Of course, and then towards the credentials thing, I think it's a really hard thing to change, because the current problem is that not necessarily. I have, for example, I stopped my master's halfway. I never finished it. It hasn't been a problem for me, but that's because I'm getting vitamin B. I'm getting to know people. You're networking, and then you're getting to know people over other directions, which gets you a job on a different way. And I think that what's it come down to right now in our job orientation world, you get pre-selected from a list of CVs, or someone knows someone. And I'm much more a fan of and someone knows someone, because they actually know expectations. They have expectations towards what I'm doing. Actually, with the whole, I write CVs and I get applied somewhere. It's a super hard thing to actually get jobs right now. And we are having problems because we are hiring right now. There's a lot of AI generated CVs that exactly fit on the job that you were writing out. And finding that out after the fact for like 200 CVs for a single application is astonishingly hard. And I think that's kind of the key kicker point that we're going to notice in the next half year is we had, and I already talked with a lot of people, we had a lot of job openings over the last half a year in companies. It's gotten really hard to hire these job openings. It's taken quite a lot longer because the amount of trash you have to go through to actually get to the right people.
So the AI is not helping.
It's not helping, but it's accelerating in that case the reasoning of, okay, I need to go beyond credentials. These people need to, like, we do a lot of hiring over people, because we, like, if you know someone, they definitely get a reserved space, because that gives us the verification they're not AI generated. Simple as that. And I think that's something that we need to go back to, collaboration and like all the things that we talked that social media kind of helped, but not really helped. Collaborating in real life, working together, being together on things, and like kind of collaborating towards goals is I think the biggest driver that will get you towards jobs, that will get you towards the credentials you actually need in a job. In the coming years, especially, the more AI is being used. I don't know how it's with you, but I hear of people writing their dissertations and stuff in AI.
It is impossible. I'm just going through it right now, because I've set my students what at face value looks like an essay. And I've just basically said, here's a situation. Okay. In fact, it was related, I think, to where do you think this whole AI thing is going over the next 2 years? And then I said, but here's a list of trigger questions that you could consider. And I give them about 20 trigger questions. That complicates matters a bit, right? So here's something. So I'm trying to get people to demonstrate to me is that they know how to think. And I'm also telling them you can use Gen AI, you can use Claude or ChatGPT. But I want to understand the process you're going through when you give in a problem. Here's a problem. Here's a whole series of questions. You now need to decide. You don't need to answer all of these questions. I'm just trying to help you. Now, question. Okay. Did I use ChatGPT for those questions? Yes, I did. But I had the original idea. And then the machine helps me expand that. Now, how can I check that these people are actually doing their work? Good question. I'm saying after doing that, I need a 3-minute video from you. Explain to me what you did. Okay. Now that's the way you kind of triangulate. But going back to the world you're coming from, okay, which is university might not be very helpful. As you said, you dropped out of a master's course, and there are many people who went to MIT Media Lab, and they normally drop out after year 1 for two reasons. Either they've been hired or they can't afford the fees anymore, which tells you something about it. But they're there for exactly the same thing you said, the networks. Because once you go into there, you've got privileged networks. I think what's worrying me at this moment is that people are potentially going to use some basic skills, the ability to read, to write, to communicate, to express ideas in a human way, and to have that kind of human feeling of this is okay for me, it's not okay for me. Most of people are navigating life through screens. And yet you are one of these people who are helping them navigate through screens. So do you see what I'm saying? Now, I want to move slightly before you can go to the other questions, I guess. This whole idea of VR, and I just want to pull it back, okay? This whole thing about the metaverse, this is what was supposed to happen 2 years ago now. 3 years ago when Zuckerberg said we're all going to the metaverse, and now nobody talks about the metaverse. So can you take me from games, the metaverse, AI, and then we'll dive into AI and what else we want to talk about AI?
I mean, I think the notion at that point, and especially, I think it was a point at crypto where also the metaverse name got very much taken into the hands of crypto. Everyone was kind of trying to accelerate that idea, but I wouldn't necessarily it didn't happen. I think, and that's something that it's same thing with AI that's going to happen in a more sneaking sense. It's not going to appear as like, hey, there is this one metaverse that is right there. But at some point, you're going to know more people who play VR games that don't. At some point, you're going to know more people who use AI that don't, even though it might not be advertised anywhere. It might not be a specific one solution for it all. And I've got, like, I'd say in comparison to when I started out in VR, I'd say the friends amount that have VR glasses at home, even if it's just for hobby or just part-time or they just tried it, definitely tenfolded in the last 5 years. I've got like literally at least every second person I know has one of the glasses at home and uses them sometimes. And I think that goes towards a sign where people were ready to buy the Vision Pro for $3,000. Like that's a small car. Like you can do a lot with that kind of money, but people were ready to buy that just because it promised the same thing. And it was a good proof of concept for Apple in that regard, that people would buy it. People would be ready to go for it. And I think we're going to see a whole more of the AR stuff, similar akin to the Google glasses. There is already one or two companies who are doing similar things. And I think that's much more what we're getting back to because our technology now is there. We have nicer displays that can be used close to the eye as kind of just an overlay on the side. We got AI vision, AI.
You've got these specs now that you can buy.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
I've tried them once and I got a bit disconcerted, but I think it's just, maybe I don't know how to use them probably.
I mean, specs are like, they are purely voice to text, which is also one of the mediums that already is possible. But there is, I forgot the name of them, Brilliant Labs, I think. They have a glass that actually has a small HUD display with text, green text, very simple, not tracked on the space or anything. But this is, I think, a direction where we're going, where your Apple Watch, your glasses, they're going to give you more notifications. They're going to make that a lot more seamless. And I think that's where the metaverse actually begins. Because at this point, and I think that's what kind of is already present, like most information about a shop, you're not getting about their flyer. You're getting it from metadata that's saved online on Google Maps. The metaverse is already in some senses there, and it's just getting built out to our perception. But right now we're interfacing still a lot with flat screens. But I think that's changing a lot with the like I see so many people with Apple Watches. That's 24/7 tracking for you with all the information readiness you need.
Yes.
It's basically being in the metaverse in real life. You're listening to the heartbeat sensor that like is on your digital numbers, all your digital steps that you collected over the day. At best, you're going for some kind of achievement hunting with Google, with like Apple Fitness or something. And all of that already is part of metaverse.
It's too late for him to become a cyborg, which I think you guys will be. You guys will run till, your life expectancy will be 100 and something because there will be too many devices which are implanted in your body, which will be trying to give earlier warning signals as to something is going wrong and what bits of you will need to be replaced. So that I get. I think the dovetail with education, which is what's worrying me and people like me, is that we've had a Victorian model, which it has been in many people's interests not to change because there is power vested in the credential. And I still see very little sign that is changing. So whilst there might be people like you, and I know some people, I know quite a few people who dropped out of the education bandwagon and made a lot of money, but they tend to be the narrow exception. To get into those kind of networks that you are talking about, not being a graduate sometimes can be a barrier. Being a grad then gets you into those kind of networks and those kind of old style things. Okay. Now, on the other hand, for us, the great breakthrough was the internet. And that for us, and I think I'm one of the privileged generation that remembers a pre-internet life and a post-internet life. So I know what it's like to go out and look at the sky or go to a concert without a smartphone and understand, what it means, like watching The Who or something like that. Yeah. So I think my concern at the moment is what will replace the education systems that we have? I don't know. How do we assess people is what people are assessing? I'm not particularly interested in it at the moment. I'm only interested in, are people learning anything which they couldn't learn by staying home?
Yeah.
And I think that is the real issue at the moment. And that's why it goes back to this personal learning pathways. And I don't know how to solve it at the moment. And I'm going around in circles. The little time I still have left doing this kind of stuff. Okay. So anyway, I don't know if we round off the whole education thing, even though I'll keep on referring back to it. And we go back into, AI and whatever, where AI is going to take us, let alone AI agents and what, because as I said, I'm only interested in what can the tool do for me? Yeah. Because I'm very selfish. So what do you think about AI agents or where AI is going to go next?
I mean, I think it's a very interesting development. Like a year and a half ago or something, there was the discussion about basically tree of thought prompting, and the main idea I think behind agents was always there, that when we get AI to self-prompt itself and kind of let it decide on its own goals, if it has good enough reasoning, which especially GPT is focusing on right now, like OpenAI is focusing on right now, we can get them to self-organize to a certain degree. And I think that's a powerful factor which will come available in the next year. I think next year is going to be a year of agents quite a lot. We've already seen, I think, the first developments in that regard. Not that it hasn't been there over the last year. There's a lot of development projects.
Talk to me about AI agents. Explain what do you mean as an AI?
Okay, so I think AI agent is a very complex mean for just saying that there is a singular AI that follows up on tasks until it completed its purpose. That means basically it gets a goal and it gets the possibility to execute on tools, different things. First of all, web search, I think, is one of the main general ones that we know, but that can go as far as having agents to execute certain amount of code, agents to be able to collect certain data and paste it somewhere. So that definitely is up for interpretation of what you're using the agent for. And the good thing is that depending on the tool that you're building, every of those agents possibility has all those tools available. So each of those little agents can get a different goal that combined work on something greater. We're definitely still, like, everyone's still definitely working on it. It's definitely not perfect yet. And we got the interesting thing that they tend to get lost in finding certain things and finding solutions. We're getting better. And I think especially the new O3 model, which does the reasoning by itself before it actually executes on a task, shows some great results potentially. We haven't got the real results yet, but that's as far as the statistics that they show up, that it actually is capable of not losing itself in its thought, which the earlier models happened from time to time. When you had long conversations, you got lost in the conversation actually. So that I think is crucial for those agents actually to work and to make them, they aren't independent. They are just goal-driven, very good goal-driven workers. But 100 goal-driven workers, one of them might strike gold, and that's enough. And I think that's where the key interesting factor of agents comes in, the multiplication factor. Like GPU race is crazy right now. Everyone's building GPUs like crazy, but being able to have those agents at the disposal is right now really expensive. So there's not many people who can actually run that at that scale. But when you can, the possibilities you can do with it and like the things you can go through this are crazy in my mind. I would love to have access to like OpenAI servers and just run some problems that I have in my mind just out of pure curiosity of what 10 OpenAIs come out, 10 GPT-03s come up with at the same time. And I think that's where the power of agents comes in. And that's going to be more and more intransparent, because they're just going to work behind the scenes. For you, it doesn't matter who answers your email in the end. When you send an email to Melita and you want to get a new internet contract and you get a response with a new contract. Could be AI, could not be. And at the current point, it's just email, but that goes step by step, I think, further. The more technicality things, of course, real hands-on things are still the thing I think that will thrive the next years. But from a technical standpoint, it opens up a lot of possibilities of just letting things run and do things and find new problems, find new solutions, help you with things that you don't have the time to take care of, even by just supporting it, but rather just letting it run on the problem itself.
What I find very useful is that I think all of the chatbots are doing it now, from GenAI to Gemini to Claude, is that I can start a conversation and leave it, or ask a question, and then I go back, find the same stream, and then another question. And of course, it remembers. Human beings don't do that. And I'm finding that extremely useful. I also find, and Claude is very good at doing this, okay, that you ask it to do something. Now all the others are doing it. Notebook is doing it, okay? And it then asks you a question. Would you like me to look into this? And you might not have thought about this gap. So my feeling is what we should be teaching people is to get smarter at asking questions of the machine. The thing is, we're a long way off from there when you've got a model where the whole education system is supposed to be based on somebody who knows all the answers and somebody who doesn't know all the answers, presumably the young person. And that's a one-way conversation. Now, there are many models which have been tried out in education for many, many years. Okay. People are supposed to go to a lecture prepared, and then you have conversations. But I think if somehow we can go back to the art of conversations, with or without machines, and whether we start calling those agents now, it might be very different to the way you're looking at agents. I'm looking at somebody who's coming from humanities, and I have 30 questions I need answered every day. That would be useful for me, I think. I also think that we've talked about education. I think the immediate, application is going to be health.
Yeah.
I think for sure.
Yeah.
And that's a no-brainer for me. Including robots, including back to Musk's, whatever we believe that these robots actually did exist or not, or whatever. It's just
there are schools that have already pre-ordered them. They're that.
Funny enough, I've heard of friends already who were saying that they would order them if they would be available to the public.
I would definitely order a robot to have conversations with my father, for instance.
I find the idea super fascinating because we stepped away from a point of pure possibility, but from I'd like that. We've stepped away from that's a cool idea, that's a cool dream in the future to
I think that's what's changed. Yeah.
I think that's a very big thing that AI will also drive, because the factor of I need these tools, I'd like to have these advancements is the thing that drives the thing in the shadow behind it. AI agents going to take a lot away of UI and UX, because they're just going to make it easier. Because instead of having to press 10 buttons, you're just pressing one button. The rest is figured out by AI, by your personal AI. It's going to communicate the right information, and it's sending out the right request, and it comes back in a response in your design, in your personalized design.
So we're also going away from the idea that, 10 years ago, everybody was saying everybody should learn how to code. And now it's this can code, I'm going to,
It's getting hard. I've got a few friends who just starting out in coding. And not only is it getting hard to compete with good people who have the tool at their hands, but it's getting hard just to find jobs because the companies are rather looking for seniors right now. Because it's easier to replace 2 juniors with 1 senior and AI. Most of the times it's enough. You get better quality of code and you don't have to train them. And that's I think a big worrying part on my side, is that code still will exist. someone will still have to look over code. I'm still looking over the code that AI creates for me, even though I'm using AI.
You check it. Yeah, like I have to check answers that comes on set.
And the more you write code, the better you are at code, the faster you can read it as well. I think that's the key factor behind it, because the more people we are employing, or the less people who actually are able to read it and write it, we're going to have a big dissonance between AI created stuff and what we actually can do with it. We're taking away capabilities from us, I think. And that's, I think, a dangerous part, where our life is controlled by computers. 99% of things are done over some kind of internet thing. If it's payment, if it's health, it's something. And I think that we should have an interest for that. There should be an interest for the world that we are surrounding us in. It's just gotten really hard to get the interest, and it's gotten really hard to actually do something with it now. Accounting as well, though, for, of course, we had a little bit of overhiring in regards to Corona, where everyone was like, we need only coders. So I think it's that play and give. We need to come back to, okay, in Germany there's something called Ausbildung, not an internship, but like basically you're getting trained in your workplace for like, I think 4 years as well. And then you're basically getting a job there. Most of the times you're getting offered. But it's all on practical work. And I think that's something that we really need to look at again, for how we are actually getting people from education, base knowledge, to their specific direction and where they can help out.
So, okay, let's go back a little bit towards the games. How important are the individual prompts from the students, and like how are they meant to engineer these prompts to best suit their needs? And how do you balance actually people's individual requests and prompts and wishes with the greater good for their own education's sake? And even on a personal basis, how can people sort of get better with these AI tools to better achieve their means?
Yeah, I think there's two sides to that, since I think prompt engineering is a means to an end that exists right now, because communicating with these AIs is very specific. And it's already gotten less prevalent, I'd say, than it's been at the start of GPT-3 and 3.5. It's gotten a lot more fluent, the conversations. It's understanding a lot more by now. But prompt engineering in that specific kind of came through understanding what kind of actual text data is online, and how is that formulated in comparison to what we're conversing, what we're actually doing, what you want from it. So prompt engineering, I mean, creative writing goes in that direction, I'd say. But it was very specific, since it's a very technical space. It came being through the whole web data. Everyone who wrote front ends and like filled out web creative writing knew a little bit better on what the AI also wanted to see to give out something in the end. We are though taking the approach, first of all, we are doing the prompt engineering. So we are making sure that whatever we are giving the teacher specifically as an input possibility is surrounded by something that explains the context in a good manner. That partially comes through the data that you are linking, so through the PDF that you're uploading, that comes through basically our decision on how education, the flavor should be from how our AI should act. But in the end, that gets influenced by what the teacher writes. For students in the end, in their personalized learning, we're going much more in an exploratory sense. So the idea is basically a student performs a certain way in different tasks in different areas. We can change up these tasks. We can change up the areas, but we can find out slowly what their directive is that they're going. They're particularly good maybe at one certain game. They're particularly good in one certain direction because they are performing or redoing certain tasks at a certain frequency. And that's definitely something we're working with educators to like find out, okay, what is a good repetition frequency that makes sense? And at what point do you see, okay, we introduce a new topic? There's research on all the interleaving and stuff. And we want to make that more a fluid process. That instead of the students actually, hey, I want to learn this, the student just goes online, they got their list of things they have to do, and then they basically just work on it and just start exploring a little bit. And there might be something that's not in their year, but that might be something in another school that's taught that's just recommended to them for some extra bonus points in game. But it might interest or pique their interest. And that's what I think is the most important part that we're trying to go for with the whole thing. That exploration is not only something necessary, but is also the main driver behind getting the knowledge yourself, understanding how to learn for yourself, because your interest drives that learning.
And you mentioned that sort of this AI is learning about the learners as the user goes about using software. Is there, I know that perhaps it's a bit cruel question, but is there sort of a risk that these sort of, it's obviously very precious data, and you're dealing with minors who generally very impressionable, whose brain chemistry is still relatively plastic. And I mean, we've seen not using necessarily technologies advanced as AI, but the methods used by, and I'm not saying that people are going to use Axon Park technology to do this, but in Germany there was the Hitler Jürgen, which was incredibly capable of engineering almost these sort of killer, diehard patriotic individuals. Are there any safeguards in place that sort of prevent? I'm not saying to that extent, because obviously that is quite far, but sort of bad actors using this, or even states perhaps in using it to sort of drum up the sort of support they need. Is there anyone giving any oversight as to?
I mean, to a certain degree, we are of course making sure that the general content given adheres to the guidelines generally by OpenAI and stuff like that. So there is already, I think, a very big net of, okay, no dangerous things, no harassment things. There's I think a general net of, okay, this is okay. The second thing that we're doing though is we rely mostly on our educators, because we think, and as we said, this is not a thing.
This is ethics, basically.
This is ethics, and this is a discussion to be held between people, not between computers. And it's a thing where we are saying this is a tool. It might be a very powerful tool, but it's still a tool for educators to be able to put their educational knowledge into works and available for the kids so that they can just grab it and take it and use it. But we're still relying on teachers basically to make sure that what they're inputting, they're verifying. And we, for example, make sure of that by whatever you're uploading, you're basically putting your name below it. So whenever there's someone learning a lesson that's specified by your information, there's your tag basically connected to that document, where that information is taken from, what it's being used for, and how it's basically verified in the end. So we're making sure that the teacher...
Just linked to your identity.
Yes, basically. And since we're going to work firstly with educators in that sense, we want to make sure that they have the capabilities to edit things to their detail, to their degree of this is right, and put their name below it. Because I think that's also a good thing. If your lesson goes crazy and everyone plays it and the kids love it and they learn so much from it, your name's below that. For every educator that's just upcoming, it's something I think that's also a super good possibility.
It seems to me we're at the stage where we've gone from Google is making you stupid, which was the buzzword 15 years ago. And now it's like AI is going to make you super lazy. And AI is going to turn humanity against, or it's going to become adversarial. No, Harari is not talking about artificial intelligence now. He's talking about adversarial, intelligence, if anything.
And the case he gave of for example, the job applications perfectly shows Harari's point of
So you can, I think we're at this kind of interesting moment. And I don't think anybody knows where it's going to go, frankly.
I wouldn't say it's wrong though.
Wrong is
stupid. Googling can make you stupid.
Absolutely.
But knowing how to Google can make you very knowledgeable. And I think the same thing goes for AI.
I agree.
And that's what I think the biggest part is that makes it so hard to right now find the right space in AI and all these emerging techs, because everyone's trying to stand on the side for it. But it's definitely both. AI is going to make some people really stupid who are going to rely on it 24/7 and are just going to be basically directed by that AI. But there's also going to be people who grow to insane lengths because they can amass knowledge that they would have never been able to before.
It's a moment. It's a real moment. And in the same way that COVID was a moment, going back to education, when, as you said, computer firms hired a lot of coders because everybody ended up getting incarcerated at home, and this was the only interface to other human beings. So guess what? Okay. And it was also a moment when education was momentarily plunged into the 21st century, and then it's been trying very hard to go back to the 20th century ever since COVID has gone away. Remember, when I was talking about AI, there are many universities that are actually have come up with policies for, like handwritten exams, have gone away from any type of essays which are supposed to test your thinking and are militantly adversarial to anything deemed to be with AI. And even, most academics I know were there a while are using AI to check their writing, if nothing else. And you will get other people saying, here's a Turnitin submission, and all of this, all of this stuff is marked as potentially having been generated by AI. The most ridiculous example I saw this week was somebody's biog was flagged as being potentially generated by AI. So somebody writing his own biog, which he probably then pushed through AI, and then the machines flag this is AI. So we're in this kind of ridiculous situation. The other thing I want to flag now, and maybe we can conclude around this, is some research that we're trying to do. We are going to be working on at the 3CL, which is this intergenerational divide, skills, the workplace, and AI. So we're looking at this, what we're calling is the multi-generational workforce. We have people my age, the boomers, who are supposedly ICT illiterate. No, we're supposed to be stupid and don't know anything about machines because we weren't born with machines, and you guys are supposed to know all about it because you opened your eyes and you had the machines. And I'm just trying to think of the skills that we are going to need to get people to work together. Now, one of the things that I found really interesting is when some of us were in Sweden, we went to this games company called Tokaboka, I think. And some of these ethics issues were coming to light. For example, I'll give you a stupid example that you could design your own character. And then they had to figure out that if, there's a girl aged 10 and she's designing herself, and this is what she looks like, and here's a frying pan. And now she's designing another character who's potentially her sister. Is it okay to put her sister in the frying pan and fry her, for instance? And should the game company intervene? Is that an ethical issue or not? They decided not to, if I remember well. They said, it's just a bit of fun. Okay. On the other hand, what we're also seeing is people, Gen Z, going to the workplace, and there is data, it seems, which is validating. A lot of people are either Gen Z are very disappointed as to what the workplace is and what their expectations of the workplace is all about. And you saying at the very beginning that it's becoming very difficult to hire. So I'm just keep on thinking as to how we're going to use Gen AI to hire the right kind of people, whatever those skill sets might be. I don't know what the skill sets needed are to thrive in the age of AI. We're going to go out and try and get some decent research. In other words, do case studies in different countries. So I don't know whether you think about this or whether you think we're all wasting our time looking at this situation that we're seeing evolving. Young people with the brains wired differently to the 60-year-olds who are still in positions of power at this moment in time.
I mean, I think there is different roles definitely for different ages that have a certain sense behind it. I don't think that you're locked in just because you're a certain age. You're only the knowledge person. You're only the wise person. I think you have the possibility definitely to get the knowledge of the young person. But I'd say in general that there is a certain clarity behind older, wiser people being able to say no to new things because of their experience, pre-taking some steps that they might have taken already, testing out some things or giving their information further, while the new ones are always going to try to go beyond what everyone has gone before. And I think the combination of both is what makes it actually powerful. While the middle class, the middle people in between, everyone between the young innovators and the old wise person, is the perfect person to actually implement it, to actually being able to execute it, because they have learned the actual tools to be able to execute it. They have seen a few projects fail, but they're interested enough to seeing something succeed to actually pull in it. And I think the accumulation of all three gets us actually to true things. AI, I think, in that sense, is just another, like we said, a means to an end. I think what we have to find again is the collaboration behind it. It's feeling a lot, and that's a feeling I've got while I've came up with programming is I was competition for the older people that I came to the company at. I wasn't like an asset for them, but I was potentially the person that's going to take their job in 2 years and why they're getting fired, which I definitely understand. which again comes down to our whole social market, how everything's working, how companies are working. But I think there's both. There's a power behind having a wise person on board and having someone super new who doesn't know anything, who just gets started purely because they're interested. And they both together will work wonders if they're actually working together. I've got a beautiful, like, our 3D team is basically consisting of a little bit more knowledgeable person and someone who just came out of university here in Malta. And they work together brilliantly. She comes up with new ideas. He comes up with his knowledge and showing her what he already knows, what he tried, where he can teach her stuff. And they work together brilliantly. And it's the best thing I've seen so far. I've never seen any team accelerate that fast than they two together. And I think that's a powerful sign which we need to bring back, because it got somewhere lost in the whole financial, social world that everyone's working for themselves and is just for themselves out.
I think the whole promise of social media collaboration and sharing economy is all of that. I think that was the huge big disappointment. But I blame that. I mean, the technology was all set up for people to collaborate, and for a while they did. Then the big money went in, the tech bros went in, and we all got locked into a handful of social media platforms and the algorithms and the old advertising model, and there's no alternative to that, and data being your data is your data, and the rest is history. I'm not sure it's going to get any better, that model. I haven't seen any other model at the moment other than the big will get bigger and eat the smaller ones, and there's some wonderful maverick company, including yours, at some stage somebody else will come and buy it if you're doing a good job and make somebody very rich, and the rich will get richer and the poor will get poorer. I'm not going to be convinced that that model is going to change in a hurry, especially with Musk and the company being in positions of power right now. But I do think there is an opportunity for people who are in love with learning to use these tools to learn quicker, faster, better, and in a more personalized way. And so I'm seeing it that way. I certainly would be very interested in new models, and I hate to call it the world education. Okay. I mean, you guys wouldn't remember him. There was a guy called Ken Robinson, who's now been dead for about 7 years. Just go and watch him on YouTube. He's been talking about creativity in education for the last 20 years. Everybody ignored him. But he's got, like, I don't know how many millions of people have watched the YouTube channel. Why has that not changed? If AI can help, change that model, I'm totally for it. But I think the only way that's going to change is by people voting with their feet and going to alternative models of it, what we call education. The credentialing system, however, remains very much alive and kicking at the moment. But it's the last bastion of power, which I think, unfortunately, some of those old education systems still have. So I don't know if we exhausted.
One question from the masses that I can anticipate is just being the fly on the wall in the room is probably tapping into Mark's knowledge base and asking him probably one of the most frequently asked questions when it comes to, because you tapped into it when you talked about Turnitin, which is AI's ability to detect the work of other AI. Is it a complete fallacy? Is it even possible? Does it already happen? And in what context? Because
I think it'll be a real example. Just happened this week. If you want. Okay. Yeah. I mean, so 1, 2, 3, 4 of us have worked, ironically, on a book. We're not going to be able to publish this, okay? But which is related to
Alex Lenin.
I know it's because I'm not expecting this to be in the recording. Okay, so I'm just. So I'm just using this for anecdotal. You can't share this, but I can share with you something which happened this
week. Let
me
just quickly timestamp this, so I immediately save myself.
Yeah, do not use this. Okay, do not use this. But that's why I was kind of hinting at it. So. Okay, and you should stop recording this basically. So, 4 of us, I'm saying 4 of us, so you have 1, 2, 3 PhDs and 1 master's guy that you know, because it was Jacob who was helping. Okay? And we were working on, we produced a chapter for a book on AI and the ethics of education, which is going to be published by Routledge sometime next year. And the people behind it are Indian professors, but also coming from the United States, okay? And I'm trying to remember what our chapter is called. I think it's called Decentralized Technologies and the Future of Education. So we wanted to go from social media and blockchain, how blockchain could have given us a better social media than what we have, which is all links to it. And 4 of us working together, long article. I get it. Okay. And so, of course, what did I do? Okay. And so I went into Claude and I said, check for repetitions, whatever it is, 4 different working styles. I've got a bit of things which I need to be changed, but essentially all I changed was the introduction and the conclusion. Okay? And it comes back flagged by these guys in this not including. They just send it back to me and said 35% of this is like AI generation. So my first thing was to kind of fuck off. Okay? Okay. And then I just literally stuck to my guns and I said, my university is now getting us to use this as a tool. I'm using this as a tool. For example, the abstract is just a mechanical thing. We just the string. Here's the abstract. There's no thinking in this. The introduction has gone through this and give me intro. And the conclusion is, what's your problem? Exactly. And by the way, you flagged footnotes as being AI generated. Our bios are being AI generated. This is rubbish. Come back. Don't even come back to me. Or just take this out of your chapter. And they have to come back with an apology saying,
right, I'm going to timestamp this because we've run a bit of a side quest. Just because what you're saying is essentially.
No, but this is AI, a book on AI.
Yeah, you've brought it.
Well, we're using AI for fair use, and the people are saying, "Oh no, you're cheating because this is an academic book."
I mean, rethinking the whole like AI checkers. You're not checking if it's AI. You're checking if it's averagely internet language. To be fairly honest, because that's what AI is, and that's where it comes back to. AI is a statistical model being based on our language that we participate in the internet with, and flagging that gets gradually harder the better it gets because it just gets better internet lingo. And I'd say even that a lot of people are starting to sound like AI without even wanting to. Because you're reading articles online which are 90% written by AI, all using phenomenal and like all those adjectives that AI loves to use. And by now people just write like that partially. There's a whole generation coming up which just learns to write and read with AI. Or books that are made by AI. I think it's a really wrong question. If you have to ask the question if something is written by or read by AI, your question is not really interesting. Like if it's about the content of the book, it doesn't matter if it's written with AI or not, as long as it reads interesting. If they give you context or feedback on something, that's constructive feedback. But just because it's AI doesn't mean like that it's not valuable or not the right thing, or that it's a tool that I'm using to its fullest extent, like my calculator, like you said earlier. And I think that's the key part that remains there is you can fact check or you can try to, but I think if you're doing it, you're finding a means to an end for something that you maybe should realign with current day and age.
It's an interesting time.
Yeah.
It's an interesting time. And I think that there are going to be a lot of bad educators masquerading behind the ethics of education.
Yeah.
And hiding behind, because again, alternative is what? But at the same time, I do worry that there is, as you said, young people are increasingly going to be using AI to craft their sentences. Young people that are used to using already emojis to express human emotions, maybe. We risk losing some basic literacies that for my generation was bread and butter in terms of us securing those credentials or securing that job. So we're in this kind of interesting gray area. I don't know how we're going to sort this out, fix it. We haven't talked about also other ethical issues. What is AI trained on? Copyrighted material. Okay, where's the material coming from? Fair use or not fair use. We all know what's happened with Spotify and all of these other kinds. So we haven't dealt with any of these other issues. But I think from a practical perspective, I think in terms of learning, from my view is that the only thing I can do with my students is I stick to my guns, get them to ask better questions.
Yeah.
And keep on asking better questions and then using the critical thinking to say, this is not the answer I quite needed. Let me ask another question until I really get some value. And by getting some value out of that, that's what the human is doing in a way. In other words, it's forcing people to go to a higher level of learning which they wouldn't have right now. Most students are just coming up with the first, reply and just regurgitate and give me my credential because I'm entitled to my credentials because I've paid for my education.
In fairness, I think it's a bit more complex than that. They've been trained like that from a young age. That's basically schools are effectively looking for one specific answer. And
Correct. We can blame it on the education system.
I know you don't.
No, I'm not agreeing. I mean, I don't believe in the one-size-fits-all system, but that's what different generations have had. It all goes back to how can we get, and going back to my question about different generations and Gen Z getting to the workplace, the horror of the workplace.
Yeah.
Okay, so having to be with human beings who are not like you in the same place, or maybe not, maybe stuck at home but working on a project with deadlines.
I mean, the whole, just going back to that emoji language thing, because I think it's a very interesting perspective because we are kind of aware of the change happening, but it's not like we didn't have hieroglyphs way back.
Sure.
And I think there is a certain evolution happening right now and it's a little bit backwards. You talked about the basically companies growing bigger and bigger and having more power in the whole world. I think when there was just little countries, very small countries that bonded together for bigger countries the first time, there was the same thought and the same worry. And I think the same thing's happening now, just we are having a very aware perspective on it. We are seeing right now that companies are growing more influential than governments are. Like the influence of companies and their money is, I would say, way beyond what actual governments are doing by now. It's vice versa by now. And that's going to grow. I don't see that happening. Like you said, I'm not seeing that changing anytime soon. And I think the gradual development that we are though perceiving there is something necessary that we won't be able to work beforehand. We won't be able to write out the emoji language that the next generation is going to just develop. We're not going to be able to see what kind of real power struggle that the companies are going to have over the next years. Just saying about chip manufacturing, just saying about the resources, like all those things are definitely going to develop to some degree. How obvious it is to the everyday person, how obvious it is to you and me, and like all of you guys, it's a whole different question. And I think that again, like the metaverse, it's there, it's happening, and it's a fluid thing that gradually starts coming in more and more. Won't be obvious until it actually looking back and we'll be like, wait.
It goes back to these, and I think some of the questions which we had wanted to ask you and didn't ask you, it all goes back to philosophy, the meaning of life, what's important. And I think it's very difficult to future gaze into that. And, I will stick to my guns that most people will still want to have a meaningful life.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, you only realize those things when you get older and when time is not on your side. When you're at your age, you don't think about time. People my age do all the time, and it becomes opportunity cost. I'm here speaking to you, I'm doing something else. And that's the way my brain thinks. And I think if AI is going to help me or younger people do the things that they really want to do, so much the better. I think the workplace will change. I think some jobs will disappear. It's what David Graeber used to call bullshit jobs. Okay, I think a lot of those, and accountants and whatever it is. But I think it's still too early to see where this is going to go. But I was very interested in speaking to you because of this games, and maybe we haven't spoken enough about games.
We could speak forever.
And in fact, this was my last question. What question do you think we should have asked you, which we haven't asked you?
I think the biggest question I always get asked from people that's always remaining is, what can I do? What can I take home? Like, if I go home now, what can I do in my life to actually not be caught off guard? And I think the biggest thing is being curious. A lot of people have lost being curious about life, about things, about whatever. And I can't give you a direction because you might not be coding interested. You might not be art interested, but be interested. Go further than what you've done yesterday. And I think that's the biggest question that always remains, that's not specific to AI, because AI might be the current symptom that drives that factor. But it's going to happen throughout life. I think a lot over the next coming years, especially with all the technology changes that are happening right now in research. It's going to be a way different world in 10 years down the line. And if you're not able to drive through change, it's going to be really hard to actually participate in this world in a meaningful way for yourself. And I think everyone has interests. Might be different ones. You don't need to agree with everything. But finding your interest and fostering it, I think, is the big thing that everyone can take home and can do on an everyday basis. Learn something new every day, no matter how small.
I once read that the one thing we should all do is once a week do something which scares us.
Yeah, I like that.
And I think that's a good point of departure. So I think with AI, I think there will be some people who will think that it's a way of getting them not to do the work, that the machine is going to do the work, or not to do the learning, and I think those people will be in trouble at some stage. I think people who will understand, as you said, that you need to be curious. That goes back to this whole Steve Jobs famous speech. Okay. But yeah, I think he was onto something. You stay curious. I think that's the only way. You won't be able to beat old age. But I go back to my 95-year-old father-in-law. I mean, he could do with a robot.
Yeah.
Right now, in the same way my father could do with somebody who can speak to him about AC Milan for 3 hours. And I can't do that, but the robot can. And would it make him happy? I think it would. And would it make it, my 95-year-old father-in-law happier that there will be somebody who can actually get him to put on his trousers in the morning? That would also be good. And in between, there's all the myriads of things that people are going to need throughout the journey of their life. And I think there will be companies that organizations will think of that. But going back to education, this is supposed to be the stock that human beings have to make them be human. Then I think there's a lot which is a miss, and there's a lot that people can learn. I'll finish with this. One of the things that Alex and I heard when we went to an IT company when the CEO was probably close to my age, said, and we're talking about generations, he said, when people are in games, playing games together, they can't tell how old people are. It all goes back to skills or strategies or both. And that is something which I think is very, very interesting. So in the same way that you can have a screen which masks people, which is the problem I have when I'm teaching people. Like, I can't, they refuse to look at me. They're looking at this.
Yeah.
I thought it was doing something else. So anyway, that was fun. I mean, do you have anything else you want to?
Well, this might not make the edit, but one thing that whenever I speak to people in AI, I don't think I've met anyone who's actually believes that AI is this silver bullet, other than obviously these big tech gurus online. In your experience, is this the case? Like almost everyone I know who's very into their tech always gives me a very nuanced response the response tends to be that AI is a tool like any other. It's neutral. You can use it for good. You can use it for bad. You can use it for smart. You can use it for dumb. Is this the inside of tech, which is I think a microcosm of its own? Is this the prevailing perspective, or are you sort of outspoken almost in that ecosystem?
I'd say there's both sides of the story. You hear a lot of people who are denying any kind of real good features coming from it, more than just being a repetition of what's already existent. And there's the other side who are thinking it's a salvation for everything. And even especially in the coding side and the programming side, you'll find both opinions very, very vastly. I think the big thing why publicly a lot of people are talking in a very nuanced way is because I think blockchain is just shortly around the corner. A lot of people have talked very positively about blockchain in a sense where I think the underlying sense why a lot of people talked positive about blockchain was right. The means to an end were just not the right thing most of the time. So it ended up being a lot of scams, a lot of rug pulls. And that's something I think that hurted the space. So everyone is in AI, especially now that there have been some promises over the last 2 years, which are not that uphold. Everyone's getting a little bit more careful, I'd say. I still think it will have an impact not akin to anything other. But it's not something that happened yesterday. AI has been in development since the 1980s. like since we are knowing how to do computers, like since we playing chess, we've like trying to create a kind of an AI that mimics human capabilities. And it's the long story short, I think that will in the end prevail in there. That we'll look back on in 10 years and be like, okay, this was the silver bullet or it wasn't. But you'll find both sides frequently.
Yeah. Thank you very much. It was very interesting. Obviously, you could keep on talking to you for ages.